Hey guys, it's Belle, and in this video we are going to be reading through and translating and discussing the Akoluthia is Adelphoiesin, which is the fixed part of a liturgy for the creation of brothers. Now this Adelphoiesis, brother making literally in the Greek, is a very controversial subject within historians of queer history, because there is a famous scholar, or was a famous scholar, he unfortunately passed away, John Boswell, who wrote a very interesting book called Same-Sex Unions in Pre-Modern Europe, where he argues that ceremonies which are called Adelphopoetic ceremonies functioned to create these sort of unions which were like a precursor of same-sex civil unions almost in Western cultures. And this text itself is taken from some of the documents that he provides from the Byzantine Empire in support of this thesis. Now, the short of my view on it is I disagree with this view, and I don't think that it's in many ways comparable to same-sex civil unions that we have in present-day Western societies, for the most part because those unions are usually considered to be sort of alternatives to marriage, and at least where I'm from in the UK especially, before the legalization of gay marriage, they were the alternative to heterosexual marriage for gay people, because same-sex civil unions were legalized before gay marriage was. But then also now they're sort of for heterosexual couples who want to have a union but don't like the institution of marriage per se, perhaps because of uncomfortability with religion. And so nowadays, there was actually, I believe, a civil rights fight in the UK to get it legalized for heterosexual couples as well who didn't want to get married. But my point is that civil unions in the UK are generally considered a sort of alternative to marriage, and based on my present and comparatively limited understanding of the evidence about Adelphopoetic relationships, I don't think that they very often mirrored to such an extent the kinds of lifestyles that married couples enjoyed, particularly when it came to the regulation of sexual relations between a couple, because in my opinion, the most convincing argument that these unions sanctioned some kind of homosexual sexual acts taking place between the two partners involved is an argument such as that which, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce his name, Nick Jovich Shash, maybe. He goes by also the Orthodox Provocateur on YouTube. He sort of makes an argument that these ceremonies and the people conducting them encourage people to essentially look the other way when it came to same-sex sexual acts between couples who had been joined in an Adelphopoetic ritual. And I think that's the strongest case that a person can make for these unions mirroring marital relationships to any particularly strong extent. Based on my present understanding of the research, I am going to do a lot more research on this and digesting all of the documents that Boswell provides now that my Greek thankfully is good enough to be able to actually read it. And at some point in the future, I'm going to be doing a video essay on this theory and fully going through the evidence to consider whether it has merit or not, or to what extent it has merit. Now, for the time being, though, we're going to look at just one of those pieces of evidence, which is this Akoluthia is Adelphopoiesin. I butchered the pronunciation of that word, and I'm going to beg your guys' forgiveness when I read through this. I'm probably going to stumble over my Greek, and the pronunciation I'm going to use is going to be modern Greek, because I'm attending a Greek church, and it would be very hard for me to learn two pronunciations and switch back and forth between them. So let's read it from start to finish. As usual, if you want to pause the video and have a go at translating this on your own, feel free to do so. And what this actually is, by the way, it's the kind of a sort of prayer that the priest would say over the couple who are about to be joined. And this particular prayer sort of encapsulates a lot of what these Adelphopoetic rituals were about. So let's go and read the Greek. Δέσποτα Kyrie ho Theos himon, ho piesas ton anthropon kati konasin ke homoisin, ke δούς αυτό εξουσίαν πάσης σάρκος έδιου, ου ευδοκίσας τους Άγιους σου Απόστολους Φίλιππον και Μπαρθολομαίων αδέλφους γενέσθε, ου δεσμούμενους φύσεως, αλλά πνεύματος Άγιου κοινωνία. Hoc τους Άγιους σου μαρτύρας Σέργιον και Μπάχων αδέλφους γενέσθε αξιώσας. Αυτός ευλογήσον και τους δούλους σου τούτους, οδύνα και οδύνα ου δεσμούμενους φύσεως, αλλά πιστέως τρόπο. Δώσ' αυτοις, Κύριε, του αγάπαν αλλήλους αμυσίτως και ασκανδαλίστους είναι πάσας τιας ημέρας της ζωής αυτών. Πρεσπείες της Αγίας Θεοτόκου και πάντων των Αγίων σου, χωτισόν το κράτος και σου εστιν η βασιλεία και η δύναμις και η δόξια, του Πατρός και του Υιού και του Αγίου Πνεύματος. Okay, so what does all of this mean? So as we can see from the first few lines, we have a lot of oranges, which are our vocatives. So all of these are addressing Despoта Kyrie ho Theos, O ruling Lord, our God. Ho piesas, you who have made ton anthropon, man or mankind, kata ikona sin ke homeosin. So according to your image, ikona, and likeness, homeosin, ke δώσαυτο, and giving to them, to him I should say, exousian pasis sarkos ediu, the authority, pasis sarkos ediu, over every physical illness or over every illness of the body, because there is a great emphasis in the Byzantine and Orthodox Christian traditions of Christ as healer and of liturgy as healing and of church as a hospital for the sick. So the emphasis being placed here on mankind being given power over physical illnesses is part of that tradition, and it could perhaps also be a reference to overcoming a sort of considered pathological attraction to people of the same sex, because as I have covered in videos such as the sexual politics of bread in Visigothic Spain, homosexual sexual acts were illegal in medieval Western European societies, and they were considered to be a form of mental illness or the product of mental illness. So this could here perhaps be a reference to the power of Christ overcoming the potential of sexual attraction between the two partners involved, but more likely it just sort of refers to a general sense of healing and spiritual health within the church. So they are calling out to Lord who made mankind according to his image and likeness, and who gave to mankind power over every disease of the body. Ho evdokisas τους Άγιους σου Apostolus Philippon και Bartholomeon adelphos geneste. Now this is kind of complicated, but this means ho evdokisas is you who taught, tus Agius su Apostolus, your holy apostles, Philippon και Bartholomeon, Philip and Bartholomew, adelphus geneste, to become brothers. And that's kind of a key word here, brothers. Not even necessarily phili, which would be friends, or gami, which would be married partners, but the word being used here is rather specifically brothers, which is another one of the reasons why I don't, at least yet, buy that these kinds of unions were parallels for same-sex civil unions that we have in the present day. So, you, God, who have chosen, or have taught rather, your holy apostles, Philip and Bartholomew, to become brothers, following, of course, the example in the Acts of the Apostles, oudes mumenus physeos, ala pneumatos agiu kinonia. So, not being bound, des mumenus, is accusative masculine plural, so it's referring to the men being bound, as in chained to each other. Now, this is the sort of language which sometimes overlaps with that which is used for married partners, but I think this is more a function of there being a sort of spectrum of a spectrum and overlap of the kinds of language that people in the Middle Ages used to talk about love of all kinds, including romantic and sexual, which is partly why, for instance, Augustine of Hippo describes the generative power of heterosexual sex as the potentia amicitiae, the potential or the power of friendship. So we have them being bound as not in a physical way, ou physeos, not in a physical way, ala pneumatos agiu koinonia, but through the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. And this udes munus physeos, I think, is a reference to the idea of their physical bodies not being, in the eyes of the church, suited for a sort of sexual union, and therefore they are not to be bound together physically in that manner. And this might even refer to regulation or an expectation that these couples not physically engage in the kinds of activities which might be considered to risk turning the relationship into something less than holy. If you look, for instance, at Alred of Rivaux's treatise De Amicitia, on friendship, he talks in his chapter on the kiss how a kiss ideally should be a spiritual kiss and not one which very often actually occurs with the meeting of two lips. It's rather a sort of a kiss of the minds or a kiss of hearts. Now, I think that's a bit gross just because I find kissing gross and I don't want to think of getting on with my buddies as being like kissing them. Thank you very much. But Alfred of Rivaux speaks a lot in that chapter on the kiss about how a kiss with a physical kiss with impure thoughts can be the same as adultery. So he warns very strongly against it and says that when Christ was kissing his apostles, for the most part, that was what it was referring to. It was a kiss of the mind, not of the physical bodies. So I think that's what this reference to not being physically bound is doing here. Although granted, and I must point out that this is from, I believe, a manuscript of the 1000s, 900s, and Alfred of Rivaux is writing in the 1200s or 1100s is when he's writing. So, and he's also, bear in mind, writing in the Western Church after the Great Schism. So this Byzantine tradition is not necessarily connected in the same way to Alfred of Rivaux's tradition, but they're probably going to have very similar views on homosexual acts and also on just love in general and kissing. So this reference to ou des mumenus physeos means they're probably not physically too intimate, but they're rather bound by the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. Hoc tus hagios su martyras, just like tus hagios su martyras, your holy martyrs, Sergion ke bachon adelphus caneste axosias, you who also deemed worthy axosias, your holy martyrs, Sergion ke bachon, Sergius and Bacchus now. These are two saints who were known for having a very close friendship and they were martyred together. There's a good few same-sex couples of this sort throughout the hagiographical records, such as Nereus and Achilleus, who actually have a tomb together that archaeologists have found. It's very cute. Nereus and Achilleus. You also have Eugenia, and I believe her name was Basilissa. I may be remembering this incorrectly, but in the detransition addition to Eugenia's story, she develops a very close friendship with a Roman noblewoman called Basilissa, and they end up being martyred together. So Sergius and Bacchus are some of the best known or people within this tradition, the saintly tradition of holy friendships or brotherhoods, fraternities, siblingships, however you want to talk about it. So that's one of the reasons why they get referenced a lot in these texts. So you, Axios, you have deemed worthy for your holy saints, geneste, to become brothers, for your saints, for your martyrs, I should say, Sergius and Bacchus, to become brothers. So they are or rather they're equating Philip and Bartholomew and Sergius and Bacchus, saying that the two people who are present at the ceremony, the two men who are present at the ceremony, are going to become brothers in a similar manner to these holy figures. So avtos eplogison ke tus doulos su tutus. May you also bless tus doulos su tutus, these servants of yours. Hodina ke hodina. This one and that one. And this, I find that really sweet, is that you can almost picture these people standing in front of an altar as this is being said, and the priest pointing at them. Ures mumenus physios alla piseos troppo. Not being bound physically, but in the way of the spirit. Thus aftis Kyrie, give to them, O Lord, tu agapan, the love of them, allilus amicitus, for each other, without hatred, amicitus, que ascandalistus, so that they may be, so that they may be not hating each other, and ascandalistus, without scandal. So this is, I think, a very important line, and this word ascandalis is something that comes up a lot in these Adelpha poetic liturgical texts. Now, my personal interpretation of this is that this actually is a very strong message to the community that yes, these two monks are going to be in closer physical proximity than would normally be permitted for monks, because we know from monastic regula, certainly from the Latin West, and I haven't looked into it that much yet, but I'm willing to bet this was the case in the Byzantine Empire also, we know that monks were very closely regulated and not allowed to spend too much time in physical proximity to each other. So the fact that these two monks are being joined in an Adelpho-poetic relationship means that they may well spend a lot of time with each other. And as we can see in Felix of Toledo's Life of St. Julian of Toledo, which is going to be another video on my channel coming out during this month, we can see in that life how St. Julian of Toledo and Guthala of Toledo spent a lot of time with each other. And that might arouse suspicion normally. And so I suspect that these kinds of ceremonies were designed specifically with these words, ascandalistos, and emphasizing that these men are going to live without scandal, to say, yes, they're in greater proximity than would normally be allowed, but these are holy men and there's not going to be any improper sexual activity between them, so don't worry about it, essentially, is what I think is going on with this language here. So what it's saying is, give to them, Lord, love for each other, without hatred and without scandal, so that they may be without hatred and without scandal all of the days of their lives. Pasas tas himeros tis suis apton. So pres bies, and this is dative plural going with aptis, which is also dative plural. So what this means is that it's just doubling in for the pronoun here. So God is going to be giving them love to the presbyters, the elders, tis hagias Theotoku, of the Holy Theotokos, which is the Virgin Mary, ke panton ton hagionsu, and all of your saints. Hoti son to kratos, ke suis din hi basilia, ke hi dynamis, ke hi doxa. So this is standard liturgical stuff. Hoti is because, son to kratos, yours is the power or the might, ke suis din hi basilia, and the kingdom is yours, ke hi dynamis, and the power, ke hi doxa, and the glory, tu patros ke tu iu, ke tu agiu pneumatos, of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And then in the original manuscript, this goes on to the next part of the Mass that the priest is saying. And so there we go. From start to finish, God is going to give these two men love. And bear in mind, the word for love here is agape, which is a sort of religious love and a sort of all-encompassing love. It is not eros, which is a sort of sexual love, which is another reason why I don't think that these are meant to be equivalents of heterosexual marriage in the Byzantine world. So God is going to give them this sort of all-encompassing Christian love for each other, so that they may live without hatred and without scandal all the days of their lives. It's very cute. So here we go. This was the akoulouthia from a Byzantine ceremony for Adelpha Poesis. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. There are going to be many more Greek videos coming up on my channel, including videos of me reading through sections of the Byzantine liturgy of St. John Chrysostom, which I attend in my personal life and which I find incredibly beautiful liturgy. So I want to share some of the meanings of that liturgy in its original Greek with you guys. So there'll be videos for that on my channel and just some other Byzantine Greek videos coming up. I might even do the Didache, ton 12 Apostolon, the teachings of the 12 apostles. So if you guys want to see more Greek videos, do let me know. I'm not going to offer to teach you Greek because I'm not that good yet to teach you Greek. But if you want to learn Latin or Old Saxon or Gothic, then you can subscribe to my Patreon, which we linked in the description of this video. You can also join my Discord server where we often just do language learning activities together. And so until next time, happy Pride Month. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye, everyone.